When your child is born, if you invest $7,500 and never invest another penny, then by the time that child is age 65, it will be over $1 million.
Tamar Snyder Chaitovsky is a financial expert with a passion for helping people make smart money decisions. Today, she'll guide you through practical steps to grow your money, from budgeting and saving to making wise investment choices, so you can break free from financial stress.
The research shows that when you spend cash, you spend 30% less than you do when you spend with credit, because credit just feels like free money.
What should people think about money before they even make their first dollar?
I always say, before we get into the budget, let's first figure out, what do you want money to do for you?
You said that I should be putting money away, 20% savings. Where am I putting that money?
So one of the first things I teach whenever I'm educating younger people is I teach them.
Being a Jew, awesome. Managing personal finances, not so awesome. Welcome to Kosher Money. We're doing a financial starter pack episode. People have been clamoring for an episode like this. Someone turns 18, no one waves a magic wand and says, now you know how to money. So that's what we want to do here with Tamar Snyder Chaitovsky. Tamar, tell everyone who you are, how you got into this space, and then we'll go through this awesome list of what I think people are searching YouTube for all the time, and we're going to try to bottle this into one 60-minute conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm Tamar Snyder Chaitovsky. I'm a financial educator. I actually do marketing and communications as my full-time job, and this is what I call my passion project. This is the thing that I'm so excited about, and I try to do in my free time to help educate people on how to be thoughtful and intentional and strategic with their money, make smart money decisions.
Growing up, were you the one your friends turned to and said, hey, I need money assistance, guide me? How did you fall into being the one that people are turning to for financial guidance?
I was definitely a saver. I, grew up with very strong role models, my parents, of the importance of saving. And that's probably my personality, kind of wanting to always have a nest egg and have some money saved. My first career was as a journalist. So I was attracted to writing stories about financial matters, and particularly personal finance. I realized that I have, thank God, a skill of being able to explain complex financial matters in ways that people could understand, the ability to simplify it. And at journalism school, I actually specialized in financial reporting.
They say that's Warren Buffett's greatest strength, the ability to explain complex things in a simple fashion. So I'm excited about this. People who are listening, they could be 18 years old, 23 years old, 33. There are parents that listen that have children of that age. And like I said, people step into adulthood. They don't know anything. The parents sheltered them. So this idea of money and managing their own money, regardless of whether they had an allowance or, that's not really game changing their emotions and how they handle money. What should people think about money before they even make their first dollar?
Well, I might push back a little bit.
Okay,
I
go.
do think that parents, should be teaching their children about money. This is not something they should wake up at age 18, they got their first job, or at age 20 or whatever it is, and suddenly have no concept, no budgeting experience, parents should. But that's a separate topic. We'll save that for another time. What parents should do with their kids, about allowance, not allowance, that's another topic. But you asked about, the teen themselves, the 20-year-old, they just got their first job. What do they do now? So it's tempting to say, let's first start talking about saving for retirement. Let's talk about budgeting. Let's talk about saving for a car or an apartment deposit. But I always say, whenever I do any financial education, whenever I meet with any budget coaching clients, I always say, let's take a step back. Let's first say, before we get into the budget, and we will get into that, and before we talk about investing, let's first figure out what's important to you financially. What are your goals? What are your values? What do you want money to do for you? What is it that you want money to achieve for you? Because money is not necessarily good or bad. It's neutral, right? It's a tool to achieve our values, to help us achieve the lifestyle that we want to live. And we have to think about that. What is it that we want to accomplish in life? What do we want to do on the short term, in the long term? So I really ask them to figure out, what is your motivation right now? What do you want this money to do for you? And that might be different for people.
What are some of the answers you would get? A 20-year-old sits down with you. They've never even thought that a question like that could be asked. What are some of the responses you hear?
Yeah. So I first I start with values because that's a bit they might have thought about that already. What
Hmm.
is their money mindset? What's their money personality? Are they a spender? Are they a saver? How do they deal with money? Was money spoken about in their house? Do they know about money? What do they know about money?
Hmm.
Is money something they think of as good? Is there something money? Do they have a hang up around money that they're worried money is going to corrupt them in some way? And then I also think like, how do they like to approach money? Do they want to spend money? Do they tend to buy things? They want to like amass, have things, or do they prefer experiences? Do they want to go on trips? Do they want memories?
Mm.
Do they care about quality? They, want to have one really good thing, or do they like quantity? I want to have a lot. And that's important to think about. It's not something people often, it's I don't know
Right.
if it's table
No.
conversation, but I think if they do think about it, they do have a sense of where they are. It's something they know about themselves.
Someone who's 40 and 50 can be asked the same question. It's
Hmm.
not like they're once you reach a certain age, you can't be asked a question like that. I'm just thinking about myself.
Hmm.
I almost want to go through this back and forth. How much of the answer is based on personality versus upbringing? Do you find that if a parent really works with their child and instills within them certain values, that all the children in the family can be molded a certain way? Or, hey, listen, if you have a personality of someone who's just a spender,
Hmm.
that's just who they are.
Yeah. So I think the personality is unique to the person. You're not going to necessarily change it. I always tell people, especially when I work with couples, you're not going to change that. If
Mm.
your husband or wife is a spender, that's always going to be their personality. But what you can do is figure out the values. What do they want to spend on? How can we be intentional about what they're spending on? And how can we build the budget? And we'll get to that in a little bit. So we're budgeting toward the goal of what they actually want to spend on. So they're not just spending mindlessly, they're spending with intention.
So practically, what do goals look like? You say, hey, what do you want to spend money on? I'm 20 years old
Mhm.
tomorrow. I don't know. A house? College? Should I be saving up for my kids' weddings? I'm not even married yet tomorrow,
Mhm.
So how do you think about the time horizon or the years out when someone's sitting in front of you, 20 years old, no debt, no money?
No debt. That's great. I'm
Uh-huh.
glad to hear that.
Oh, really? 20-year-olds come to you with debt?
I mean, some of them, yeah. Some of them, if in college, they're paying for their
Uh-huh.
own, they've got student loan
Student loans.
debt. Student loans are a big thing.
I
And
didn't
some of
know.
them, if they had access to a credit card, now the rules are a bit more stringent. So it's
Uh-huh.
harder to get a credit card. But yeah, I'm glad to hear no debt. That's great.
I didn't realize student loan debt was as big as it is in Jewish circles. I don't know. Maybe I'm
I
naive.
regularly see people
Yeah.
with, 200,000. This is generally, after they're going for their law degree, their medical degree. It's usually a little bit later than what we're talking about, the
Right.
20s, but that's, they're making decisions right now
Uh-huh.
about taking on that kind of debt. It could be, almost a half of a mortgage.
Right.
It's a
That's a
lot of
lot.
money
Yeah,
that
wow.
they're in this age, they're thinking about that. So really thinking through what are their goals. And I like to always think about it short term, medium term, and long term. So the short term might be that they, need transportation. So they want to buy a car, lease a car, that might be something that, they're looking at. It might be establishing an emergency fund. It might be that they want to get their own apartment and figuring out how can I make that work financially. Medium term is, sort of longer. It's they're maybe that's 3 to 5 years. So maybe they're dating, they want to get married, they're thinking about that. What would that look like? But long term is really thinking about retirement. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's, they really starting now, this point when they're, sort of, especially if they're single, they're not yet married, they've got a huge advantage right now.
Mhm.
They really can, if they make smart decisions right now, that could set them up for their future in ways that will help them for years to come. So I always say, like, this is a real opportunity. Before we got married, and we're working, if that's the case, a lot of them are getting married before they're working. They're still in school. So
Mhm.
that's not always possible. They're still often getting supported by their parents. But let's say they are working for a few years. What if we, actually save a lot of that money and, start building up a retirement fund? That allows them in a way that there might come time later on when they're in their, mid 30s, 40s, and suddenly the tuition bills are really high and they can't contribute to retirement during those years,
Mhm.
possibly, or not as much as they would like to. What if they maxed out their retirement? Crazy idea, right? Like, what if
Mhm.
they did that full, that full amount while they could, depending on their salary, or just, 10, 15, 20%. That could really set them up for life because they've got years, decades for that to compound.
What happens when you now given them concrete goals?
Mhm.
How does their mindset change and how does the conversation change?
I always say I don't give the goals. The goals
Okay.
have to come from them. Because
Mhm,
if it's a goal that I care about, but they don't care about, guess what? It's not going to be motivating.
mhm,
So it has to really be something they care about. And you know what? The goal could be I want to go on a vacation. I want to live my life. I want to enjoy my life. I want to maximize my time. And I say, great. That's a great goal too. The key is to be intentional.
mhm.
And the key is to be thinking, some that are spending goals and some that are savings goals. So you don't want to spend all on the vacation, but it's a good idea. I always tell, especially young couples, I say, if you have an opportunity and even, you're single, that too, maximize your time. Go visit the world. When I have kind of her 4 kids, it's a lot
Mhm.
harder to get
Yeah,
away.
yeah.
It's much more difficult. It's not just even the money. It's babysitting. It's more challenging.
You mentioned budgeting, and I've seen people who budget magically have more money than people who don't budget. And everyone I found thinks about budgeting differently. Usually there's a negative connotation, but what budgeting means to one person can be different to another. What is budgeting and what do those conversations around budgeting look like?
Yeah, so budgeting is really important, and I think some people have a negative attitude to it, but when I teach younger people,
Mhm.
they usually are really neutral about it. They don't know much about it if they haven't had experience. If their parents gave them a credit card, and just said spend, they've probably never had a budget. And it's really important to give them that skill of having a budget. And I say a budget is really about being intentional with your money, telling your money what you want it to do. And instead of your money just coming in and coming out, you're actually deciding, this is what I want to do with my money.
Mm.
This is important to me. And it's really when you look at your budget, you're seeing your values, you're seeing your priorities. If you're spending a lot on an area that's not important to you, you have to ask yourself why. Why am I doing that? Why am I just doing it because of peer pressure? Am I doing it because everyone else is doing it? Am I doing it because I'm just not thinking? Your budget is really your list of priorities. Another definition of a budget that I love, and I love to always share this, is that a budget is happiness allocations.
Mm.
When you have your budget, you actually could decide what are the things that make me happy? What brings me joy? And it's important to ask that question. For some people, getting that daily coffee, that brings them joy. That's really important. For my husband, it's a Slurpee. And is that necessarily the best way to spend your money? There's no, moral equivalency or there's no moral judgment here. It's what's important to you, what makes you happy. And you have to make sure, though, then that you have the money there for that. Let's say you love to eat. Some people are foodies. I happen not to be, but some people really, that's their joy. They love to try a new restaurant. They love to check it out. They like that experience. They love food. So that you want to build that into your budget. But then you have to make sure that there are other areas you're cutting back. So if you're not so into, maybe you don't need a big house or maybe a big apartment. Maybe, you're okay sharing an apartment. We're thinking more people in their 20s. Or maybe clothing isn't as important to you. You want to look nice, you want to look respectable, but the brand name doesn't really do it for you. So it's really knowing what are the areas I want to spend on and what are the areas that, I could be more frugal with because they don't actually bring me much joy.
I'm happy you mentioned the foodie and the coffee
Mhm.
because if anyone ever sees me walking into Starbucks, they point a finger and they go, "Hey, you're the kosher money guy. You can't be buying Starbucks." But the more I hear smart people like you talk, that's not true
Mhm.
necessarily. If I told them, "Hey, I really don't go on a lot of vacation. Like
Mhm.
I don't spend money
Mhm.
the way a lot of other people do." But yes, I do have my vices or
Mhm.
things of that nature, maybe as it relates to food. And big picture, it's not a lot of money, but yes, I could deprive myself, if that's the word that we're going to use, and save every dollar that comes in. But it's not budgeting, you're saying, is not about depriving yourself of every pleasure in the world.
Exactly. That it shouldn't be it shouldn't be depriving. It should be about prioritizing the
Mm,
things that are important to you. And that's so much better. Like, wouldn't you rather be focused on the things that you want to put into your budget rather than all the things that you're cutting out?
right.
If you put in the things that you actually like, hopefully the things you don't like, they'll just fall out naturally.
So, how do you think about needs and wants? And how do you break out the buckets when it comes to budgeting?
Yeah. So needs and wants is a really important conversation and it is so personal. I always say I can't tell somebody what their need is versus their want. I mean, some things are obvious needs. We need a place to live. We need food, but what level of food do we need? That's
Mm,
where it becomes a want. We need clothing, but what type of clothing do we need? So this is something whenever I work with couples or individuals with their budget, they determine what is the important thing. They
Mm,
tell me what their needs are. They tell me what their wants are. And sometimes I could push back a little bit. I can't tell you what's important to you. That's not, no one else could tell that for you. You really, need to know, oh, this is really important to me. This is something that I really enjoy, and this is important to me. And as long as you have room in your budget for it, then you don't have guilt. So it really helps you feel good about it. Like, you could enjoy your coffee without any shame,
right.
you
Oh,
know?
I do. I do. Where does saving come into the buckets? Do you have that conversation? Do people initiate and say, hey, an important need of mine is to actually save money for the future? And what percentage do you recommend people save?
Yeah, so I recommend that people save. I would try. I like to do the 50/30/20 budget. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of it, but you
Yeah,
can.
so essentially I could explain. So basically 50% is dedicated towards needs. That's housing, that's utilities, basic food, transportation. And then 30% is dedicated. So that's you want to do a max of 50% on the needs. You don't want to be spending more than that. And then 30% is, the max that you're spending on things that you want. Things that are just enjoyable to you, whether it's the travel, whether it's the food, whether it's the clothing, those tend to be like the big areas that people like. And then 20% is the minimum that you would want to do set aside for savings and investing.
And at that age, generally, because your expenses aren't high, that is doable versus someone who's 44 listening to this and says, okay, tomorrow I'm saving 20%. Yeah, okay. Happy dreaming, But at that
But if you get
age,
into the habit,
uh-huh.
right? If you get into the habit of doing this when you're young and you're assuming that this, the 20-year-old we're talking to is living at home. Is that what you're assuming?
Yes, yes. Or not. Some people, you
Right.
have
So if they're
both.
not living at home, honestly, it might be hard actually to keep to that. I
Uh-huh.
actually spoke to a couple on Sunday and they were telling me, that the lowest, apartment they could find in Muncie and their rent is more than 50% of their income. And I said, that's really tough because, if your rent, which is only one component of the needs, is already 50%, it's going to be really hard. You're not going to have room for all the wants. And then you're going to
Uh-huh.
feel really tight and you won't be able to do the savings that you need to do to propel your career, to save for your future. And so they said, well, what do we do? I said, well, if there's nothing cheaper, we got to work on increasing your income because that's the other side of that equation, right? Like if you if you can't decrease your costs, you got to
Mhm.
increase your income. So we really want to be saving. You want to get in the habit, particularly when you're young, even as a teenager. I have a 14-year-old daughter. She babysits. She's a youth leader at our shul. The money that she gets from being a group leader, we put that into our Roth IRA, and we match it. We did that initially to encourage her to want to put that in there. We'll talk more about. I don't. Should we talk about Roth
No, we're
IRAs or
gonna
should we
get to.
wait? We'll
I
get to
have a
that.
few more
Okay,
budgeting
so we'll talk
questions.
about that.
Yes.
But and then the rest of it, I try to encourage her. So even when they're teenagers, get into the habit that a certain percentage, 10% is tzedakah. Get in the habit of that, and then putting aside 20% for savings at least. And making sure that some of it you're investing for the future.
So you've hooked people. People are like, I get it. I want a budget.
Mhm,
How should they be doing that practically? It's 2024,
mhm,
2025. There's digital
mhm,
solutions, there's old school paper solutions. How does someone know what's best for them and what are the options
mhm.
out there?
Yeah. So I always say the best way to budget is the way that's going to work for you. A budget is a living document. You're not doing this once, set and forget. You have to be looking at this at least on a monthly basis. If more, then that's great. I mean, you shouldn't be looking at it every day. That's probably a little excessive, but weekly, monthly, you should be looking at it. So some people, they like starting pen and paper, literally writing everything down. Other people, an Excel spreadsheet works for them. Other people like apps. You need a budget. Monarch money is sort of like Mint. Mint closed down. A lot of us miss it. I was a Mint user. Monarch is the closest to that. Every Dollar, that's Dave Ramsey's app. There are a bunch of apps that are out there. There's Rocket Money that some people like. Even if your bank might offer, I know Chase offers a budgeting component that is, actually getting quite good. So, I really encourage to use those apps, but sometimes just writing it pen and paper or a spreadsheet, like just writing it down first and really getting to know what are the key expenses. What am I paying for rent if I'm paying for rent? Utilities. What am I paying on groceries? What am I paying for eating out? How much am I spending on Amazon? That's a big, big, a lot of people don't have no idea what they're spending on that. And then they're like shocked. Oh my gosh, all those little things, they really add up. getting that all down and really understanding your income too. You said, someone who's just starting a job, they were told they're earning $60,000. Guess what? After taxes, that's not $60,000 anymore. So make sure they're budgeting based on the amount that's actually direct depositing into their checking account. Don't budget based on the gross amount.
How often are you looking at it personally?
Personally, so I actually that's a good question. I go into my app pretty often. So I use Empower.
Hmm.
That's one of the apps. I find that's better for tracking net worth than it is, and investments than it is particularly for budgeting. The
Hmm.
budgeting component could use, some improvement,
As
but
you're talking, I'm feeling guilty because I'm like, yeah, I sat once, but I didn't think of budgeting as an ongoing thing. Maybe I'll do it once
oh,
a year.
oh, oh, whoa. Okay. So we're
And
gonna fix that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no. Budgeting is it's because things are changing. Your life changes,
right,
right? So, you need to be changing. And sometimes we think we're spending on something and we don't realize how much we're spending. So we just need to update it. It's not like a bad thing. We need to be honest with our budget. I would say at least every few days or every week. I'm also always categorizing, making sure everything's in the right place. But you don't have to do it that often.
right. But
I like this stuff.
the advantage of using tech is that things streamline in. You don't
Exactly.
have
It's
to run around.
automated.
Right.
I
Right.
might have to change, that education payment. They marked it as something funny. So,
Right.
I might
Got
have to
it.
do some rules, set it up. But I often say when people are starting to budget and they're not used to it, don't start with the app right away because you need to feel it. You need to write down every expense. That's how you get aware of it. But that doesn't mean you're going to have to do that all the time. Once you're in a good, groove and once you've been doing it for a while, then you could kind of have it in the app and just look at it, be more passive. But in the beginning, you really want to be hands-on.
We'll be right back, but ain't. New advertiser alert. You're going to like this, Kosher Money listeners, because this is going to help you in a big way. Do you have a pain point in your business that's slowing you down? Maybe your logistics system isn't quite fitting your warehouse's needs, or you're wasting too much time generating manual reports in QuickBooks. Maybe you've considered innovating a whole new way of operating your business, but dismissed it because it's just too hard. Time lost is profit lost, and scaling feels impossible. That's where BitBean comes in. BitBean specializes in custom software solutions that solve your unique challenges. So, whether you're in healthcare, real estate, retail, any industry that's drowning in data or complex processes and workflows, their expert team, BitBean, is going to work with you to understand your needs and create a best in class system tailored to your business. I've seen it over and over again. One client, a therapy company, was overwhelmed with managing all the field work, government forms, back office workflow. And what did BitBean do? They built them a custom solution that streamlined everything, saving them time and money. Cha-ching. So for you, it's time to stop chasing information and start innovating. Visit bitbean.com, link in the show notes to see how you can help scale your business in a much smarter way. That's bitbean.com, custom software solutions that work for you. Link and info in the show notes. Tell them your friends at Kosher Money sent you. A quick break with a word from my friends at Twillory. You know what I love about Twillory's website. You never know what they've got cooking at any given time. It could be a site-wide sale, a flash sale, or a drop in coat prices. There's always something exciting happening. But here's what I do know. If you're a first-time buyer, you can use code CHAI to get $18 off your purchase of $139 or more. Do not use the word INSPIRE because that is Yaakov's promo code, and I'm going to try to beat him here in 2025. So use the promo code CHAI, $18 off of $139 or more at twillory.com/kosher money. Make sure you go to that URL so I get the credit and I beat Yaakov. I'm a huge fan of their vests. You've seen me wearing it, especially in the winter like this. It's perfect for staying warm and looking sharp. But hey, maybe you're listening to this in the summer of 2027 and wondering what they've got for the warmer months. Check out their air suit. It's lightweight, breathable, and stylish. And if it's 2027, they probably have a whole lot more in store. With Twillory, you're getting new clothing, new styles, and quality that lasts so you don't have to keep running back to the store every few months. By the way, I heard they're actually building a new store, but we'll get more on that later. Go to twillory.com/kosher money. You're welcome. And now back to this week's episode. A friend of mine opened up an account at Ally
Mhm.
Savings Bank, and it has this envelope system where
Yeah.
he tells the money where he wants it to go, and he says it's game changing
That's
as it
great.
relates.
That's great. They also have, I think Ally has different where you could, for savings goals, you could
Mhm.
actually divide. It's like one account, but you could divide the savings into different
Cool.
goals,
Yeah.
which people find helpful.
And I will say sometimes there's trial and error,
Mhm.
right? Just because Empower worked for you and then someone downloads it and says, this is not for me. Play around with a few of them, right?
Exactly. You have to find what works for you. And for some people, particularly when they're younger, there's something called the envelope system, like literally, where you take envelopes and you put cash in it. It's risky because you don't want to be carrying around a lot of cash. You could lose it or you could get stolen, but you actually feel like you're spending money. And a lot of our, the younger generation, I hear I'm like sounding so old, but like grew up in a world where everything was digital. They haven't seen, cash is just, it's sort of
Right.
on its way
Right.
out. And when you spend cash, you feel that you're spending it. And the research shows that when you spend cash, you spend 30% less than you do when you spend with credit. Because credit just feels like free money. When I teach, a lot of my students, they kind of think an ATM is free money, or they get, it sounds funny, but they get a checkbook. And, I know most people don't use checkbooks anymore. They're like, wait, how come I ran out of money in my account? I still have checks.
Mm.
They don't get it. They don't realize that it's the checkbook is just allowing you to write from the account, but, it's not any indication of how much money is left in your account. We do need to teach them, give them some hands-on, and with kids also, get them, have them feel a dollar, have them use it. And I also say have them spend their own money on certain things. I know we're not really talking about parenting kids, but I always put that in there. Like my kids don't love that, but when they want, the PS5, they've got to contribute to it. They got
Mm.
to work on that. That way they appreciate it more when they spend money on something and they're actually spending their own money and not the parents' money, not just Hanukkah money, which is free money in their eyes, they appreciate the gift so much more because they put themselves into it.
I was going to ask you, an adult who goes on vacation using credit card
Mhm.
versus somebody who saved up for that vacation, do you think the person who saved up for it is enjoying it more than the person putting it on
I
a
know,
credit
I
card?
certainly do.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's all I would never recommend going on a vacation using a credit card that you can't pay off. It's fine to play the credit card game, but only if you're gonna pay it off in full. That's really, really important. If you don't have that money, you shouldn't be going on a vacation. Or you
Right.
should do something smaller that you can afford.
We've gone from cash to credit card, which is physical, and now Apple Pay, Google Pay. You don't even have a physical, you're just waving a magic
Right,
wand.
right. So what do you yeah, exactly. So it's really important that we make sure that people understand this is real money.
Right.
This is not fake pretend free money out there.
Right. Right. Before we get into investing, I wanted to ask you, if someone is married, right?
Mhm,
24,
mhm,
22, 38, they
mhm,
just got married and now they're bringing somebody into their money relationship, and you have two personalities that you said can mostly not be tamed as
mhm.
to how they operate with money. What happens with that clash, and how do you ignore slash overcome slash work through it?
I'm so glad you brought that up. So I actually this Sunday I hosted the Aisle, which is a project of Project Ezra and the YU Counseling Center, Yeshiva University, and YU Connects. It's a program for engaged couples and newlywed couples in the frum community to teach them about financial management, how to have a healthy
Awesome.
financial life. We also have a component with Dr. Avi Michelle, who does a fantastic job on teaching them how to have, emotional connection, develop a strong emotional connection.
We'll put a link in the notes
Yeah,
so
that would be
people,
great.
yeah.
So this is exactly what I teach in that. This is why it's so important when you're single to really explore your money personality and how you approach money, because then when you work together with
Mhm.
somebody, and oftentimes I always do an exercise where I give them, are you a saver? Are you a spender? And where are you along that continuum? And more often than not, they're not the same. And I tell them that's actually a good thing. When you're both a spender, guess what? You might not have, arguments about money, but you will probably get into debt. That could
Mm.
be dangerous. You really have to be careful there. You might need an advisor. If you're both savers, and my husband and I are both savers, then actually you might be great at achieving your financial goals, but taking a vacation might be very difficult because both of you are more geared toward let's just save up money, and that's not healthy. You want to be spending some money. You want to, again, the money is there to serve a purpose. It's not there just to be in your bank account. So I tell couples actually, if you're, one of you is more of a spender, one of you is more of a saver, that's great, because if you both work together and compromise and hear each other out, you could actually work toward developing a balance and coming closer together so that the person, that actually is how you could sort of tame, as you said, your personality. You're never going to completely change. You'll still be, at heart a saver, but you'll get used to spending a little more because your spouse will encourage you to do so. And the spouse that is used to, spending
Mhm.
will get used to understand, oh, it's actually really nice to have an emergency fund. It's really nice when, the car broke down and it was annoying to have to deal with it, but I was able to afford it. So it wasn't like a chaos. It wasn't a crisis. It was just annoying. So you start to realize, oh, there's a benefit to my spouse's money personality, and we could work together.
That's interesting because you essentially just said if a couple is arguing about money, that's not the worst thing in the world.
Exactly. But you have to do it in a way that is productive. So
Uh-huh.
you really need to understand where your spouse is coming from. And I always tell couples, I have them start with what are your values? This is how we started, with values and goals. What are your financial goals? What are your values? To do that independently and then, share with your spouse and look at that. See, are we on the same page? And if we're not on the same page, how could we get on the same page? How could we help our spouse achieve their goals? Because if I really want to go on a vacation and my spouse really needs that emergency fund, they're really feeling stressed out about money, I need to meet that goal also, because otherwise I need to take my spouse's goal seriously. You're going to have challenges. And by helping them feel secure, by having that emergency fund, then hopefully they'll be able to enjoy that vacation. So maybe it won't be the most expensive vacation. Maybe it's a compromise. And maybe that emergency fund won't be as big as they would like. There's some people, it's never enough.
What are some terrible ways to deal with that friction, right? Because you can get lost in the moment
Mhm.
and, point fingers. I'm kind of answering my own question,
Yeah.
but what do people do when they start experiencing friction, which is actually mental and physical stress?
Yes, definitely. So I often will find where they'll go straight to, you spent what on what? How much
Mm.
did you spend on that? Why did you spend so much at the grocery store? And I always, turn to that other spouse and I go, when was the last time you were in a grocery store? Have you seen, do you know how much groceries cost now? Like the prices have gone up tremendously due to inflation. Like, so be understanding. And maybe you should try the grocery run for a few weeks.
Right,
See how that goes.
right,
We have to understand each other. We have to both be on the same page. That is so critical.
right.
That's the key to success with couples, really both being on the same page. And I don't know if we're getting a little bit off our
It's good.
initial.
People using this information in a good way. It's funny you mentioned that because my wife ended up recently going to a supermarket that was more expensive. And I
Mhm,
said, hey, why did you go there? Didn't we say you're going to go there?
mhm,
And now that I think about it, for all I know, she did 5 carpools that day. She wasn't
mhm.
able to make it out there. So it's a priority, but it's not our biggest priority that every time she shops, she has to go further out to somewhere
Right.
that's a little
And
bit
and
cheaper.
maybe you could offer to do it.
Yes, I'm
My husband does
sorry.
the groceries.
Okay. We should end the episode now. Okay, so let's talk about investing, right?
Mhm,
We have prioritized our needs versus our wants. We're saving money. We're strengthening the charitable muscle within
mhm.
ourselves. We have the app that we love, and you said that I should be putting money away, 20% savings. Where am I putting that money? I'm new to all of this. What should I know about investing?
So one of the first things I teach whenever I'm educating younger people is I teach them the magic of compound interest. And essentially compound interest is a wonder where money grows and you earn interest on your interest. So it just grows exponentially. And this is a concept that people really need to see to believe. I often will, especially in high school, I'll tell them the tale of two pennies, of the doubling penny. So I'll give them an option where they could either get $2,000 cash right now or get a magic penny that doubles every day for 30 days. Which would you pick?
I know the
You
answer,
know the
but
answer.
a lot of
Exactly.
people pick
Sometimes they know the answer.
yeah.
But if you don't really, if you're not a math person, you might say, well, that penny, it's going to take forever to double to
Mhm.
something worthwhile. Let me take the $2,000. But that penny ends up doubling by day 30 to over $5 million, and it's really slow in the beginning. In the beginning, you're like, I made the wrong choice.
Mm.
But then, and this is what compound interest is. So in the beginning, it's slow, but then it builds momentum. And before you know it, it's doubling real money. And before you know it, it's really the way to go. So we really want to encourage people. I tell them your age is actually, an asset. A lot of times when people are young, they can't do something because they're too young. They hear so many things how you're not old enough. But here you actually have something, incredible. You have time on your side. So, and I explained that even a small amount, the problem is a lot of people who are young, they don't have much money, right? So, they're like, well, what am I going to do with this? I say, even a small amount that you invest at a young age, and whatever age you're at is, the time to start, even if you're not as young as you would hope you would have been. And that money could grow tremendously over decades. So I heard recently that when your child is born, if you invest $7,500 and never invest another penny, then by the time that child is age 65, it will be over $1 million.
Mm.
Assuming an 8% interest rate, which we could argue about, but like that's really incredible. $7,500 one time at birth, never again. It's still invested over that time, but you're never adding any more money. And then you've got over $1 million. So it's really about starting small, starting when they're young and getting them in the habit. So I really encourage doing that, investing when you're young. I'm a big fan of Roth IRAs. We mentioned that before. So essentially a Roth IRA allows the money to grow tax-free. And when you take the money out, there are no taxes on it. There are income limitations on it. So I tell people, while you could afford to do that, put money in there. Right now the limit is $7,000, that will probably go up each year, according to inflation, and, invest. Do that if you can. But I tell people to start with, let's say they got their first job. If there's a company match, which is essentially like free money, make sure you're at least getting the full company match.
And when that 7,000 goes into Roth IRA, immediately it will show 6,000, right? Because it was taxed from the first moment it went in.
No, the full 7 you take after tax dollars. So in other words, you take your money straight from your bank account and you put it into that Roth IRA, you get the full $7,000. But you're right that you need to actually invest it. A lot of people, they just put it in there, but they don't take the step of investing. And I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an investment advisor. So I never tell anyone where to invest. I talk about the importance of investing. And I personally use index funds. I don't try to beat the market. I'm like, let's just go with the market. The market over time has done quite well, if you have a long time horizon. So I just say, put it in an index fund, or speak to your financial advisor, get some advice on that. But the key is really putting the money away and making that decision.
When someone learns about investing for the first time in a conversation with you, do you find that it's overwhelming to the point that they freeze? Is there one small thing that they can do, or do you find that little baby steps as it relates to learning is important, or just throw yourself into it, learn everything there is to know, and you'll be better off? How do you
That's a
approach
good
that?
question. I actually think when they understand compound interest and they see, they see that investing even a small amount at an early age, has time for it to grow. They look at me. I've had students who turn to me, they go, Tamar, why isn't everyone doing this? And I say, because they don't know, but they look at me like, this is so obvious, this is brilliant. Why isn't everyone doing it? And it's hard sometimes when you want to spend, if you don't know what's going to happen, to have that delayed gratification of, and the investment, it does take time till it, this is, you need that time. But I don't find that they get overwhelmed. I don't think, I'm not teaching people about how to, find the next stock that's going to go up. This is not a get rich quick approach. Certainly that's not mine. Is, about just doing the right things, making smart financial choices, and, slow and steady wins the race. So I don't, you don't have to have all the knowledge, but just, making that decision, saying, I'm going to speak to my HR department and I'm going to ask them to set aside 15% of my salary, and I'm going to see it. Let's see how it goes. If I can't afford to live on that, then I could always change it and I could, set it back to 10%. But let's try. Let's see. Let me pay myself first, invest in my future, and let's see how that goes.
Right. And there are advisors that you don't necessarily have to give 1%. They'll meet with you on an hourly basis just to make sure that it's not sitting in a boring money market account gaining
Right,
0.00.
exactly. Right. Yeah, we definitely don't want it, that. I'm okay with boring though, boring index funds, but not sitting in the money market. I will say that, Living Smarter Jewish, they offer the free financial coaching. Take advantage of that. I tell everyone, you have amazing volunteers who are such experts in their fields. Take advantage.
Yeah. Wild. LivingSmarterJewish.org. They've literally sat with coaches, trained them, and now are meeting with hundreds and hundreds of couples a month. I saw the inbox. Some days it's just piling in. And, it's crazy what a 1-hour conversation can do for generations
Exactly.
down the line.
Exactly.
I think to answer your question about why people don't know about this is that investing is happening behind closed doors. Spending, everyone sees what you're spending on. you haven't been home for a week. You were on vacation. I see the car you're buying.
Mhm.
That house went up. I had a better view of that house
Mm.
than you did, right? So this idea of spending is out in the open and investing is quiet,
That's
but I think
interesting.
we need to be louder for the sake of our friends and family
Mhm.
about what investing is and how powerful it is. So,
I think that's a great point. And even just, any parents listening to this, podcast, I actually show my kids, every year on their birthday, Hanukkah, they get, thank God they have, family members, grandparents who give them checks. They also get like a gift too, but like we have, the checks we invest it for them. And, they're not always, when they were younger, not so, happy about that. How come I don't get that? But we say, this is for your future.
mhm.
And as they get older, we actually show them the statements. And we show them how it's gone up. And, this you might not feel comfortable showing exact numbers to your kids. I get that. That's, your decision. But, being able to see the growth is something that, suddenly my 14-year-old, she saw it recently and she's like, wow, I'm really glad you did this for me. I know I wasn't always so happy about it, but this is really incredible. Look how much it's grown. This is really, wow. And then she makes decisions with her own money, deciding to invest it herself, which is really, gratifying.
In the laundry room when you measure each kid's height with a pencil, that's essentially what you're doing. And kids get excited
Right.
about
So I
that.
think you're right. We have to show it to them. We have to make it real. Let
Right.
them see, some sort of statement or let them see some level of growth. Let them understand maybe it's a small, just their bar mitzvah account money. So, might not want to show them all the investments you have for them, but the bar mitzvah account and see how much that, their bar mitzvah money, how much that grew over time and let them decide, help them even potentially make investment decisions with that, with your, support.
What guidance do you have on the spending side of things? There's a way to do everything right, but bury a hole with spending.
You're saying like spending too much?
Yes, spending too
Hmm.
easily, right? It's not like 300 years ago where you had to barter in order to spend
Hmm.
and it's a click of a button. There's so many traps as it relates to spending because you can have a great job, you can be investing,
Hmm.
but then at the end of the month, you say, hey, I'm making more money than I've ever made.
Hmm.
Things are good. I'm finally out of debt. But why are things not adding up the way
Right.
they are?
And that goes back to being intentional. Now, again, I'm a saver, so it's easier for me than it
Yeah.
is for some spenders. But really making sure, like, are these things I'm spending on? First, knowing what you're spending on. Really, getting a sense of what is it that I'm spending on? Is this, is there a way to make that cheaper? For some people, the spending is, on things maybe something health related, and maybe there are ways to get better insurance to cut costs on that. There are ways to approach it. You just really want to make sure that what you're spending on is actually bringing you joy and is something that's interesting. I find as I get older, and maybe this is just maybe this is just me, but I find I just don't want more stuff. More
Mm,
stuff is more stuff to clean, to organize, to deal with. I've become a bit more of a minimalist as I've gotten older, just because who needs it? And you realize that the stuff does not bring you joy. That's not the important. As you get older, you realize health is wealth.
mhm,
That's what's important. Family. I sound a little maybe a little rosy, but it's really true. Like, I order on Amazon and it comes the next day and I don't even remember what I ordered.
mhm.
I don't know if you've had that
More
experience.
more lately, I don't know if that's old age, but, yeah, I think the Amazon effect is wearing off because then I just see a box that I'm waiting for the garbage man to pick
There
up
are all these
outside,
right, and they're
right?
all exactly waiting for recycling. And there are all these things that, they promise to solve your sleep problems and solve your this problem, and
Mhm,
half those things they never work.
right.
It's frustrating. So I think we have to stop finding solutions in stuff. Stuff is not gonna, it's that's not what's gonna give us what we're looking for. There's really, and that goes back to the core need. What are we hoping money will do for us? A lot of times stuff isn't it. It's not gonna solve that whatever we're looking for, the connection, the closeness, the satisfaction, the fulfillment, the meaning. It's, really get into giving. I really encourage those who are spending a lot, focus on giving, focus on spending time with people who have a lot less, who need you. That really helps you appreciate all the things that you do have and all the things you are blessed with.
How important are social circles, right? We see what other people are doing. Does that have an impact on
For
us?
sure, for sure. So they say you are, the 5 people you spend the most time with, you're most like them. And if they're spending like crazy, guess what? Whatever they're driving, you're probably driving the same Honda Odyssey they are.
Mhm,
Like you're very similar to the people you surround yourself with. That's important, particularly we're talking about the, 20-year-olds when you're thinking eventually of what community do I want to live in long term. Try to find one where matches your values. I live in a very out-of-town section of Teaneck, and I brag about it. When we go to shul, my kids are not surrounded by people who are wearing, no one cares what anyone's wearing. They're not wearing the latest season or know what season. They don't even know what season any of the clothes is. So we don't have that pressure, and that's so nice. It's great. That's not important to me, so it's nice not to be surrounded by that. It's important to surround yourself with people who share your values, and that way you're not tempted. And also that way your kids aren't asking for things that are completely outside of your budget or even your value system.
We'll be right back to this week's episode. But first, imagine being a child trying to focus on school or a play, but all you can think about is, will there be dinner tonight? And now imagine that stress compounded by the fear and uncertainty of war. For too many children in Israel, this is their daily reality. The anxiety of food insecurity, combined with the turmoil of conflict, robs them of the stability they deserve. They're children, for heaven's sake. But Colel Chabad is stepping in. They are Israel's oldest charity, and they are ensuring children have consistent access to nutritious food, even during times like this. When food security is in place, everything changes for the children. They can focus in school, build confidence, engage with their friends, and stress goes down. Self-esteem goes up. They thrive emotionally, mentally, academically, in all ways. Colel Chabad isn't just providing meals. They're providing hope, stability, and a sense of safety when it's needed most. You can be a part of this life-changing mission with just a few dollars or a lot. Visit kohelchabad.org/koshermoney. Give the families the security they need and the children the futures they deserve. That's kohelchabad.org/koshermoney. No dollar amount is too little or too high. Give, give, give. This money goes to an amazing place. I've seen it firsthand. I've been to their pantries in Israel. I see pictures, emails, videos all day and night. They are assisting because of people like you. Thank you. When it comes to giving, it doesn't matter if you're donating $10 or $10 million. Everyone starts somewhere. Charity, tzedakah, unites us all in a shared purpose of helping others and uplifting our communities. So whether you're giving or receiving, we're ultimately one family, connected by the values of generosity and rachamim, compassion. The Donors Fund believes that giving should be simple, impactful, and strategic. That's why TDF, the Donors Fund, provides tools to manage your philanthropy smarter. It centralizes everything. You got to check it out. So as we begin a new year, I'm recording this in 2025, January, it's the perfect time to set your financial goals as it relates to charity and maximize your impact. So with the Donors Fund, you can plan your giving strategically, ensuring every single donation is as effective as possible. If you're holding appreciated stock, consider donating it instead of cash. Why? You're going to avoid capital gains taxes while deducting the full fair market value. So you're both tax efficient and creating a real impact in the world. The Donors Fund platform streamlines your giving journey with personalized support, flexible donation options, and tools to maximize your impact. So whether you're supporting a local yeshiva, championing global causes like Colel Chabad, or planning how to give for your legacy, the Donors Fund helps you give with purpose. Start the year by setting up a donor-advised fund and experience the flexibility to allocate your donations thoughtfully throughout the year. Oh, and you'll enjoy significant tax benefits also. Links in the show notes. Get started in your journey. Manage everything in a single portfolio. The Donors Fund is here to help. Visit thedonorsfund.org/koshermoney. Like I said, links in the show notes. Now back to this week's episode. I'm a stickler for paper bills. I like at the end of the month when something comes in the mail, I have to hold on to it. I take a pen and I go through, each item. And every time I log on to Chase or wherever it is, they say, please, paperless.
I'm the same way. That's so funny. I still get all my bills in the mail. I like to have that in the mail, but I never pay them in the mail because our mail is very. We have at least locally a big check fraud, happening. So I always do online bill pay, but I do like getting in the mail. I do.
I automate payments because I don't want to be in the position to miss a payment. Whole credit score thing, and that's that. funny.
People have to be careful, though, with automating because
Yeah.
sometimes they automate, but they're not like you and actually looking at the bill.
Mhm.
And it's really important to be looking at the bill, especially the younger people who maybe didn't grow up seeing a credit card bill because they just had their parents' credit
Right.
card. You got to look at the bill. There might be a mistake. You might not realize all the subscriptions that you're, paying every single month
Right.
and you're not even using it anymore. So it's important to look at that bill, really see, well, where am I spending my money? What is it? What's happening here?
I use a service called Tiller,
Mhm.
tillerhq.com, and I get a daily email of if I have 4 credit
Mm.
cards, all the charges are in one list.
Oh, wow.
And it's $79 a
Mhm.
year, but the amount of times I saw something where I said, "Hey, that charge was a recurring charge." I call them up, I say, "Hey, please get rid of that." Like the amount of money I've saved as a result of being able to get that morning
Mhm.
email, it shows also net worth.
Oh, that's
There's like
nice.
a boost to
I'll
waking
have to
up
look
to
into
that.
that.
And it's also great. It connects to an Excel doc where
Mhm.
all your expenses and
That's great.
categorizations are there. So, we spoke earlier and you said something interesting where often the healthiest things cost less. And
Mm.
it's so true, right? Things that bring us the most enjoyment don't necessarily have a price tag on it.
Mhm.
And I find that to be true. I started playing ice hockey recently, you know, $20 or
Mhm.
whatnot. There's a cost of equipment, but once
Mhm.
that's out of the way, that brings me much more enjoyment than going to Florida for 4 days and soaking up the sun in a hotel that I may or may not have gotten on with points or
Right.
whatnot. So there's a lot there. How should young people be thinking about insurance? What does that conversation look like with them?
Yeah, so it's important. I always say I don't sell insurance. I have nothing to gain out of this, but except just wanting people to make the right decision. It's so important for young people to get life insurance when they either are expecting a baby or they have bought a house. Those are the two sort of scenarios. If they're a single person who doesn't have anyone relying on their income, it's not necessary at that point. But it's really, if once they have that mortgage or a spouse relying on the income, it's so important to have life insurance. And I say, get a term policy. Don't
Mhm.
go, whole life for most of the people listening to this podcast, unless they're very wealthy, it's not worth the extra expense. And it's not the best way to go about it. Term is cheap. It gives you peace of mind. So what you're getting is you're hoping that you're never going to use this life insurance policy, but it gives you peace of mind. And it's important for both spouses to have insurance. So even if one spouse is home with the children, they need to have life insurance. They might not have an income. God forbid something happens to them. The cost in childcare and, there's no replacement, obviously. But the cost to try to replace all the things that they do around the home
Mhm.
is so, so expensive. So both spouses need to have life insurance.
I like that you said expecting a baby because that means every time your family gets bigger,
Mhm.
you might want to consider getting more term life, right? Just because you got term life insurance when you were
Mhm.
21 and you're listening to this at 31
Right.
doesn't mean you're clear. You might need to get more coverage.
Yeah,
Is that
they
right?
say you should have 10 to 20 times your income.
Mm,
So certainly, I wouldn't go changing it every year. That's probably too much, but that is probably 10 years into a 30-year policy to think about it, especially while you're still hopefully healthy. As people get older, or have any health situations, it could be harder to get insurance. So you do want to, hopefully have something that is the most insurance you could afford that will hopefully, kind of account for some of that growth.
yeah, there's this new organization in the 5 towns. It's called Project 120, the project120.org. I can link to it. But basically, it's this worldwide, not worldwide, but in our world, wide movement to encourage people to get life insurance. It's a nonprofit. And they basically said over the last X amount of years, the 5 towns Rockaway community has spent $50 million, over $50 million
Wow.
on money to help families that have lost a loved one. And it's great. It's tzedakah, it's charity. But had those families had policies,
Mhm.
that charity money could have been put into other organizations. Now you'll say, hey, I can't afford term life insurance. I don't really have a salary right now. I need to eat before I
Mhm.
can have insurance. Any money that's made on the premiums, they're
Mhm.
helping people who can't afford it, go towards it. So it's just like
That's
this whole
amazing.
ball of positive movement. And a lot of it is awareness, right? Like
Mhm.
you heard about it, you don't, but someone who's listening to this, taking your advice, they can be in so much of a better place, even if they don't need it. And Mirz Hashem, they should not need it.
Amen.
But
Mhm.
that comfort of knowing that your family is taken care of is tremendous.
That's priceless.
Yeah. Let's talk about health insurance,
Mhm.
right? Health insurance costs a lot of money, right? When someone first gets married, maybe they're on
Usually probably
Medicaid,
till they're 26. They're
right?
probably on their
On their
parents' plan.
parents,
That's
or
what I
if they're not
see.
making enough money, the government is paying
Mhm.
for it. But at some point, God willing, as your salary grows, whether your work is paying for it or you're paying for it in the marketplace, it's a lot of money. And people
Yes.
don't realize
Sometimes
that.
I see that's like the budget buster. That's the thing in their budget that is just so, that's really hurting their budget. And it's important to think about that when you're thinking of careers. I sometimes see, a couple where they're both entrepreneurs, and that's great. But, oftentimes you need one spouse who has a job that offers, corporate health insurance at a much more reasonable rate. That would help them a lot. It's hard to both, not have good health insurance. It's very expensive. So that's something to think about. That's when you're thinking of even evaluating jobs. Sometimes they don't always share the whole health policy, and you don't always have that information, but that could be $20,000 difference. So it's important to evaluate that as part of a job offer. Usually they send you some information about that. And, really, really understanding that health insurance is critical. You don't want to ever go without health insurance.
You've seen people risk it.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
no.
and that's scary. It's
Yeah.
really, it honestly keeps me up at night.
So if someone is listening to this, they can pull out a pay stub. What can they learn from looking at a pay stub?
Yeah. So whenever I meet with couples, I actually ask them to bring a pay stub.
Mm,
And I look at that, and you could see, are they investing for retirement? How much are they investing for retirement? Are they getting a match? You could see that. You could see what deductions are coming out. So how much are they paying for health insurance? Is it, above average? Is it, are they on a really not great plan? And maybe they should think about getting a different job that offers better health insurance if possible. Or going on their spouse's plan if that's possible, if they have a spouse. And then also different things like FSA and HSA. So those are flexible spending accounts or health savings accounts, depending on what type of health insurance you have. This allows you to use pre-tax money on health expenses. And that could include Band-Aids, contact lens solution. It's not just doctor visit copays. So, it just allows you, that little bit helps that you're not paying tax on that amount. And you usually get like a credit card that you could use, or you could submit your receipts and get reimbursed. So if you're ready, you're going to spend, let's say you have a medication that you use, each month. So you're going to spend a certain amount on health expenses, or you see a certain number of doctors and you know how much that costs. Having that money that you set aside in an FSA could save you, significant money.
yeah. A year that someone has a baby,
Mhm.
chances are
Mm-hmm.
their health costs on expenses related to the baby could be $6,500. I don't know what the exact number is that you're allowed.
Yeah, I think I was looking at it before. I think it's 3,300 per person, and so 6,600 for a couple for an FSA. HSAs are a little different, but that number changes each year. I
Right.
always tell people you don't need to memorize this stuff. You
Uh-huh.
could log online, make sure it's a valid source. It's not some AI generated response.
Right.
You're Googling like a real governmental source or health insurance source. And, you could get that information in terms of limits and all that. And your HR would have that also.
And that means if someone's making $100,000, the government will view them as making $93,000, and they're only taxed on the $93,000 because the government says, hey, we'll give you a break on the fact that you're spending on your health.
Exactly.
Someone can have an FSA and an HSA, or it's one or the other?
No, it depends on your plans.
Got
It's
it.
one or the other.
Got it. And how does someone who sends to a play group that's,
License.
licensed, can they actually save money using that? I would
Yeah, so
imagine.
there's a separate one called the Dependent Care FSA. So
Okay.
that's specifically for child care, and it needs to be licensed. It could even be like camp. So
Oh.
if you don't have a licensed child care, or your kid, and it goes up to a certain age. So it's not for all age kids, but that allows you to use up to $5,000 of pre-tax dollars. Unfortunately, that's per family. And it's, child care is a lot more than that. It hasn't risen with inflation. This number kind of stays the same every year. Hopefully, maybe we could get that to change, but at least 5,000, every bit helps.
Let's talk home buying. Someone who's listening, let's talk first a married couple that's
Mhm.
looking to buy a home,
Mhm.
what are some of the pieces of advice you give them when they're thinking about that?
Yeah. So from a from a financial perspective, obviously you want to visit the community, make sure
Right.
that's, but
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're talking more finances. We really want to try, and I know this is hard, particularly in the tri-state area. You really want to try to have all of, the property tax, the mortgage payment, the insurance be under 30% of your net income. And that is really hard. That's not easy, particularly with home prices have gone up a lot, interest rates have gone up a lot. It's difficult. But it's even more difficult when you have a house you can't afford and you're not able to afford anything else because your home payment is 50% of your income. It makes it really, really difficult. And it's not, you're not necessarily going to get a scholarship because of that. They're looking at that.
Mhm.
Are you in a home you could afford? And it's very expensive to downsize. So you just want to be smart about that. You don't want to be spending more, have more house than you could afford. That can make things difficult.
You mentioned before people come to you with tremendous amounts of student loans.
Mhm.
Emotionally, that's probably very difficult, but practically, how do you have them think about it? What's the best way to paying that down responsibly?
When it's like 30,000, 50,000, it's really about just figuring out what method. Is it paying down? There are two schools of thought. Do you pay down the smallest one first, like the smallest loan, and that way you get confidence and you just, knock them out? Or do you figure out which has the highest interest rate? From a math perspective, that would make more sense and choose the one that has, and pay it down. But when we're talking about 200, 300, $400,000 of student loans, it really makes sense to see a professional who understands the income-based repayment plans, who understands, what is going to help you, forgiveness plans, what could you qualify for? Is it better to consolidate? I'm not an expert in that. It's changing all the time. You really need someone who's an expert in that area to help you come up with a plan and figure out how am I going to get this paid off? Does it make sense to pay it off right away, or does it make sense to have a, 10, 20-year approach and you're paying off essentially just the interest until it gets forgiven?
So I have a grab bag of questions tying up loose ends as we near the end, but I heard of a girl that in her 20s, she saved up money from her work
Mhm.
and she bought a house in her community and she rented it out.
Oh,
And
wow.
then she got married. Maybe she ended up moving in, but like this idea of someone who's a go getter.
Mhm.
And I don't know if she used up all her savings,
Mhm.
and I'm not making a recommendation one way or the other, but
Mhm.
if someone didn't want to just do boring index funds, that the idea of becoming some sort of investor or thinking outside the box in a responsible way, that is also an option, again, responsibly. And I thought that was kind of cool, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, I think if that worked for her, that's great. If that achieved her goals, that's great. I will say that I I have been a landlord and I had wonderful tenants. They might be
hmm
listening to this. I realized that was not for me. Not for me. I didn't like getting the calls, "Oh my gosh, something isn't working. You need to fix this."
right.
And constantly being fear like what if, a whole system goes down, HVAC system needs to be replaced
hmm
or, something bad happens. So I think you also have to know, and this is important with all money decisions, you have to know your money personality. What can you handle? What type of risk are you okay with? How often do you want to be bothered? Do you want to be dealing with that?
Right.
I mean, it's possible to get a property manager, but often you're not making enough to
Right.
to afford that. I'm a big fan of boring index funds. It's easy, it's simple, and I think you should only be doing things you understand. That's people get confused and they get in trouble when they start getting involved in money things they don't get. If you don't understand it, it might not be understandable. Like there might be something wrong here.
We want to do an entire episode on grocery shopping,
Mhm.
food shopping. It's a huge expense, and we're going to do an episode on it. What are some things that come to mind as it relates to the kosher eating family, things that you've done where you've seen success in saving money?
Sure. So I always say I have a second freezer in my basement.
Okay.
And that is the key to success. Whenever meat goes on sale, we have certain cuts of meat we like. When that goes on sale, we buy 3 months worth and, stock up. And that way it also saves me time. I'm not running out every Erev Shabbos to get to buy meat. I shop, I don't know what you have here, but we have an Aldi and a Lidl near us. And I save a lot of money on dairy, I'm not Chalav Yisrael. So, that wouldn't help if you're Chalav Yisrael, but, for dairy, for breads, for even their produce. I save a lot of money there. So I find with Aldi and Lidl, those types of stores, you save a lot. And even just reducing how often you go grocery shopping. Each time you go, you're going to find stuff. And, people always say, have a list. Know exactly what you're going for. Don't go on an empty stomach. You're going to spend more. I find I save money. I send my husband. He does the grocery shopping, and he's really good at following the list.
I'm the opposite. My wife will give me a list of 3 things. I come back with
so maybe
18.
it's better that she does the grocery shopping.
I'm helping by not
But
helping.
I find my husband is quicker than me, and he just gets what's on the list. So
That's
it's,
awesome.
that certainly saves us money.
If people have questions, they want to contact you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Sure. I would say visit my website, which is tamarsnyder.com.
Awesome. We'll put links to the show notes. This is really, really good. I'm hoping that somebody who is younger or even not younger, like me, I'm old, but someone can listen to this, and it might not have all the answers, but it helps them become aware and more intentional. And I cannot thank you enough for coming all the way from Teaneck out here, and I'm imagining this is going to help a lot of people. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. I just want to put a quick pitch for the Living Smarter Jewish financial curriculum that they recently...
Okay, go. Tell them what that is.
That they recently set up. So they have a fantastic... I had a chance to review it before this meeting. I've been involved with them for a while, and they've developed this incredible financial literacy curriculum for our schools. All our high schools, our yeshivas, they've got different versions of it, whether you want, just the basics or you want to get really in depth. The curriculum is really fantastic. I had a chance to review it. It's fantastic. I recommend that every school think about incorporating this curriculum into their school. And if you're a parent listening to this, a grandparent, really think about, can you bring it to your school? Maybe if you know this information, maybe you could, on a 1 day a week, lunch break, go and offer to teach the class. You've got the curriculum already, so you don't need to, reinvent the wheel. I have a vision where every school should be teaching this information. And that way you're not waking up at 18 or 20 or even 38 and saying, I was never taught this. Teach them. This is something that every one of our schools should be teaching.
And I think they will. It's in over 50 schools I saw now.
It's growing.
And
if it's not in your school, get it in your school.
It's not even optional. This is mandatory. If they need to figure out which class to cut, let them call me. I'll take a look, tell them which pieces of information are not useful in everyday life, but this is critical. And it could literally save lives.
Definitely. Change generations.
Right. So thank you so much, Tamar. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And that'll do it for the Financial Starter Pack. Share this episode with someone in your life that you think could benefit from this amazing episode. Go ahead. Click the share button. I'll wait. You do it? Good. If you want to be entered for the chance to win an awesome Dave Ramsey book, simply quote your favorite line that Tamar said. Which of her teachings did you enjoy the most? We'll pick 3 lucky winners from the YouTube comment section to receive a fantastic Dave Ramsey book. We pick at random. Congrats to the winners from our latest episode. Each of the following people won a $100 Amazon gift card. Stefan Gittins 24 and sh-yo6em, that's the name. If that's your YouTube name, reach out to us on livinglchaim.com and we'll get your amazing prize over to you. On a separate note, how are your finances? Are you investing, saving, spending wisely, budgeting? If you benefit from a free coach, email info@livingsmarterjewish.org like thousands before you who have benefited. It's free and it's spectacular. The link is in the show notes. Thank you to our sponsors, Twillory, the Donors Fund, Colel Chabad, and our newest advertiser, BitBean. Welcome to the family, BitBean. All the links, you know it, are in the show notes, so be sure to check them all out and drop our name when you use them, donate to them, take their services, whatever it is, they're awesome. If you have a guest suggestion, do not be shy. Like my brother Yaakov, he's very shy. Hit up livinglchaim.com suggestion tab and start typing. You never know. Someone you know who has what to say may say it as our very next guest. Oh, and if you haven't listened to our How to Invest in 2025 episode, I encourage you to check that out regardless of whether you're watching this in the summer of 2026 and beyond. It's absolute gold. My brother said at the end of every episode, I should mention a specific episode. So that is my recommendation to you. And if you listen to it again and again and again. Until next time, keep your money kosher. See ya.
Living L'chaim.